What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pit Limiter Podcast. This is episode number 13. I'm your host, Zach Buchanan. Joining me, as always, JP3, John Poole III. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not too much. What's up?
Well, I'm slowly getting my voice back after being sick for about the last 5 days, so it sounded a little rough, but not doing too bad.
Nice. Any cornfields that you visited this weekend?
Hey, man, I swear, that one time being in a cornfield in a go-kart, that's the last time. That's the one and only. I will say, though, go-karts aren't boats. They don't race very well in the rain on slicks. We ended up getting canceled on Saturday, so... But it happens.
What a bunch of pansies.
Yeah. But aside from my kart race, this past weekend of motorsports was absolutely phenomenal. And we'll jump right into stop and go. John Poole, what do you got for us?
So, some news coming out of F1. So, F1 CEO Chase Carey is expected to step down from his role after the 2020 season. There are reports that Mercedes principal Toto Wolff could succeed Carey as F1's CEO.
So Charlotte Motor Speedway has announced that after the end of Stage 2 of the Coca-Cola 600, they're going to bring the cars down pit road and stop the race briefly to remember all of our troops that were lost as a significance for Memorial Day weekend.
So, famous course in Brazil, Interlagos, is set to lose the Brazilian Grand Prix. The city of Rio de Janeiro and the Brazilian government have announced that they are building a brand new track for next year. It's supposed to be built in 6 to 7 months.
So 2018 Indy Lights champion and 2019 NTT IndyCar Series rookie Patricio O'Ward announced that he has become a Red Bull Junior driver, which is huge because at the beginning of the season he was struggling big time to find funding, and we'll have to see what the future holds for Pato.
Some more schedule news coming from IndyCar and our friend Adam Stern. Mark Miles has revealed that one of the candidates for an international race next year is actually the Middle East. That he would not confirm the venue, but in the past, IndyCar has been in talks with Abu Dhabi's Yas Marina circuit. He also didn't rule out a return to Brazil in the coming years.
That would be pretty interesting, to say the least. On a somber note, it was announced this past weekend that Mike Mittler, who was a Truck Series owner and one of the Truck Series pioneers, has passed away from cancer.
Kind of transitioning to the Truck Series. Trucks were at Kansas this weekend, and it was an incredible race. Stuart Friesen dominated the event, but after a miscue on the pit road for his final stop, he ran out of fuel with 3 to go, and Ross Chastain, Watermelon Man, for Nice Motorsports, won his first race.
That was really cool. IndyCar was at Indianapolis for the IndyCar Grand Prix, and after a lot of chatter the past couple years whether the Indy GP should still be around, I think we can put that to rest. The Indy GP was phenomenal, albeit a rain race. The action was incredible. Rossi with his problems on the first lap. We had Castroneves spinning out of the pits. Dixon led a big chunk of laps, but it's Simon Pagenaud who made a 6th to first place charge in the last 16 laps of the race to take home the victory. His first victory in almost 2 years.
So the Cup Series was also at Kansas this weekend, and it produced probably the best mile-and-a-half race I've seen in the last 10 years. It was back and forth throughout the night, and Alex Bowman was set to win his first race, but with 12 laps to go, Brad Keselowski passed Alex Bowman and took the victory at Kansas.
So Formula One was in Spain this past weekend. It was the Spanish Grand Prix, and once again, no surprise, Mercedes took 1-2 once again. It was the 5th straight race this season that Mercedes has taken the top 2 spots. It was Lewis Hamilton who took home the victory, Valtteri Bottas second, Max Verstappen third, Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc rounding out the top 5.
So the final tidbit of Stop and Go this week, Adam Stern was talking about how the All-Star race could move in the near future. Now, the original idea of the All-Star race was to move from venue to venue year to year. They tried that in 1986 to move it to Atlanta. It flopped, almost got killed. Then they moved it to Charlotte for 87, and it has remained there since. But tracks that he has mentioned as possibilities include Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway and Martinsville.
Interesting.
Yes.
So we have another guest this week on the Pit Limiter podcast, and we like to keep it fresh. We like to keep it spicy. We like to mix it up. And I'd say this is a first for us. He is a full-time firefighter EMT as well as a seasonal firefighter EMT for the Kentucky Speedway. Scott List-Ramler joins us. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing good, Zach. How are you all?
Pretty good.
Doing great.
Good. So, Scott, you're a race fan. I mean, you do iRacing with us. We're actually on an endurance team together in iRacing. Where did your love for motorsports and firefighting and EMT, how did that all get tied in together?
Well, my love for racing started when I was a lot younger. My family was a group of ravenous Dale Earnhardt fans, Dale Earnhardt Jr. fans, and I got sucked up into it, wanting to be the rebel. Turned out to be a Gordon fan.
Oh.
So, caused a little bit of turmoil in the family, but it definitely made Sunday nights during the family gatherings were a lot of fun, and I just sort of stuck with it. Eventually, I got put in an after-school program as a fire explorer when I was 14, and fell in love with the job. Never thought that I would have any connection to motorsports at all. And through one of my connections at the fire department, I ended up getting hired on at the Kentucky Speedway and ended up here.
So just a quick question. You didn't have any beer cans thrown at you when Gordon won, right?
Maybe once or twice.
Could you say only in Kentucky, right?
Only in Kentucky, brother.
I mean, I guess that's considered the South. I mean, the Earnhardt's their redneck Jesus, so.
Absolutely.
So you've also gone to Mid-Ohio to work there as well the last couple years, I believe. How did that come about?
Well, my boss at the Speedway has been trying to get a traveling team going, and she also works for IMSA as one of the responding medics in the IMSA chase vehicles. So she actually works at just about every IMSA race on the circuit, and one of the tracks that she typically works at is Mid-Ohio. And through her connections there, she decided to start helping out the fire chief up there with some organization stuff. Got a couple of people from the racetrack to go up there. And it's turned into sort of a thing that we have a group of guys go up, work the IMSA race, IndyCar race, and the NASCAR races up there. So I've been doing that since 2016. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
2016 was the first time I went up there and watched the Xfinity race in the rain.
Oh gosh.
Oh my goodness, that was a classic.
It was even better standing in the back of Bubba Wallace's pit because that's who I had.
So tell us a little bit about, say, what does a EMT firefighter actually do while they're at the track? We kind of see them on TV, cleaning up an accident or this or that, but just tell us some of the responsibilities that you would be responsible for in any given weekend.
Well, believe it or not, it actually changes based on your position on the racetrack as well as the series that you're running. So let's say for NASCAR, they put me on pit road. My job is to stand at the rear of the vehicle with my fire extinguisher on the wall, ready to respond, say the car catches fire, whatever, there's a medical emergency, somebody hurts themselves, whatever, that pit box is my domain. Now, you go to IMSA, I end up covering 6 or I think last time they had me cover 5 pit stalls by myself.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I was in charge of all the people in that area. I was also in charge of all of their well-being, and I was running up and down pit lane the entire race. It's awesome, the difference between the series. But if you're running on-track response, you basically sit in the vehicle until something happens. Can be kind of boring, but can also be absolutely awesome when you're standing out there on track and somebody's trying to get a lap back as a wave around car and they pass you doing 150 and there's probably like 10 feet between you and them.
My goodness.
Jeez. I mean, at least you basically get a free ticket to the race if you're just sitting in a response vehicle.
Yeah, it's even better than that. They pay you to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since Scott's here, as our guest, he's also going to help us out with the discussion. And our first piece is Tuesday trivia. Now, make sure you guys tweet us your answers, your response, what you think the answer is to this question. Tweet us at the Pit Limiter. Use the hashtag Tuesday Trivia as well as the Pit Limiter Podcast. And we'll see your responses here. So, fellas, here goes nothing. So, Simon Pagenaud won the Indy GP on Saturday, driving a Menards Chevy Dallara.
Yes.
He also won in a Menards Chevy Dallara back in 2016. When is the last time that a Menards-sponsored IndyCar won a race? What year, who was the driver, and what was the team? Don't Google it, though.
Wasn't 2016 Sonoma with Pagenaud, was it?
Well, I'm talking
Are you
before. I'm
before
talking
the
before
Penske deal?
Team Penske. Yeah,
Oh my.
pre 2016.
That'd probably be like Greg Ray, Texas 2001.
Actually, Greg Ray did not even win Texas 2001.
I know, it would be back in the early 2000s, though.
You got me there. I've got no idea.
Trying to think of Team Menard drivers. I mean, Tony Stewart won with the Menards paint schemes.
I'll give you this since you put it out there. All right, you did get the year right. You did not get the driver or the track right. So it is 2001. You got that one piece.
Is it the number 2 car?
Yes. That's actually the only car that they ran in 01.
Okay. It's not Jacques Lazier. I know that. No. Trying to think. Because Texas was ran twice in 2001, wasn't it?
Yep, it was the race after Indy, and it was also the finale. And it was like that for 3 seasons. 4 seasons, actually. No, it was sorry, it was like that for 5 seasons. They ran Texas twice for actually 6 seasons, but Las Vegas was the finale in 1998. Texas was the second to final race in 98.
Were they running Pikes Peak by that time, or did they already give up on Pikes Peak by 2001?
Pikes Peak was a part of the series. Actually, it was a part of the series from the 96-97 season till, I believe, 05.
Well, I know it was for NASCAR, but I think IndyCar and Truck Series stopped there after 2 years. I'm just trying to remember what 2 years.
Nah, IndyCar ran there from 96-97 through, I think it was 05.
Oh.
Consecutively.
I'm trying to think then.
Scott, no guesses?
Well, it can only be an oval, and it's going to be a NASCAR oval because that was Tony George's strategy back then, because road courses were the devil.
Yeah.
Well, you said it was back in 2001. Stewart was driving. You said, and John said that Menard sponsored him for a race win. The only other NASCAR oval that I can think of they run around that time would have been Atlanta or Homestead.
Okay, so here's another hint. Well, Stewart wasn't running for Menard in 01.
No.
They did win Atlanta that year, but that was not the last time that they won a race. And it was with Greg Ray. But
Well,
Greg Ray did not win their last race.
Oh, okay, so Greg Ray was released mid-season.
Yes.
Oh,
Greg Ray was actually released with 3 races left, and his replacement won in his second start with the team.
It's not John Paul Jr.
No, John Paul Jr. was thankfully gone by that point.
He was arrested.
Nothing against him. He was just not very fast, at least in his later years.
Oh, man. Got anything, Scott?
I've got nothing. What you got, Zach?
Okay, so John actually overlooked this. It was Jacques Lazier.
I thought it was Jacques Lazier, but I was like,
Jacques Lazier actually had a victory at Chicagoland, which was the second to last race of the season. He finished 16th, 1st, and 20th in his 3 starts with the team in 2001, and then he got injured in 2002. Actually, he finished second at Fontana, so he almost got 2 victories. He actually got 6th at Phoenix that year as well.
Huh. Well,
the more you know.
I'm surprised that I got that close with everything, because I don't.
I was gonna say you kind of threw him out, and I was like, come on, man, it's the IRL 2001. Anybody could have won back then.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I think with this IndyCar talk, we should jump into the Indy GP, because there's no doubt about it. The last couple years, the Indy GP has been a hot topic. Yeah, it's been abysmal, and it's been a hot topic. Should it be around? Should it not be around? The debate whether, having that race and making it a little less expensive for the teams, considering, that whole race weekend takes away an extra week of practice that the teams would have to pay for versus the entertainment value. John, Scott, what do you guys think about the Indy GP being around? Should it stay? Should it go? Does this race, put it in stone that it's going to be around for a while? What do you guys think?
Well, when you add rain to a race course, it's always going to make the racing a lot more fun to watch, whether it creates wrecks or wild passes, and just the massive speed disparity between somebody who's not comfortable in the rain, between somebody who is. It's going to make for some really hairy situations. And I would say we'd probably have to go another year or so before we figure out if it's the package that worked or if it was just the rain and the circumstance behind the track conditions that helped make this race what it was.
Now, I'll say that proponently, I can see where both sides come from with this. This race, it was pretty darn good. I'll honestly admit, I had to miss the mid portion of the race for reasons, but what I watched, it was fantastic. It was on your feet type of stuff, and it was great. But I won't say that I won't defend it by saying that years past it was great too. It was not. It was pretty forgettable.
Yeah, I don't think there's a memorable race at all. Maybe 16 when there's the strategy between Pagenaud and maybe Power, I think. But other than that, there's nothing.
I mean, it's been a Penske-dominated show now.
Except for 2014.
Yeah, but now, and this year, for that matter, But
yeah.
I just don't think the track lends itself well to passing at all. It was built for F1. They kind of modified the circuit there to where they don't take the extended loop, but they have a fast-flowing chicane there on the backstretch. But other than that, I don't know, it's just too F1-y of a track. It doesn't have enough opportunities to pass. You're going way too slow in the infield section, and then you're basically wide open on the other sections. I mean, they added the MotoGP section, which that's great. It creates maybe another passing opportunity, but I'd argue that just running the full oval would be better for that. But safety-wise, I get why they have it there.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that the package, having the current aero package that they have, I think that improved the racing, but I definitely think that the excitement that we saw was definitely just the fact that it was raining.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was all rain there. Rain definitely helped out. I'll be honest with you. I would argue that the Indy GP the last couple of years has been just as bad as Toronto has been for the past, I don't know, 5, 10 years
Yeah.
in terms of excitement level. But you see a rain race at Toronto, and it's not too bad.
Oh yeah, it's exciting. Keeps you on your feet. Not.
Especially when you throw the NASCAR drivers in there.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Well, I will say though, if we're talking feasibility and we're talking how the GP fits into the month of May, I think having the GP there, even if it's not a necessarily great race, I think it's still a decent opener to the month. Kind of just because it's on track activity, it's a race day at Indy in May. Even if it's not the 500, it kind of leads in. I mean, literally, we jump right into practice for qualifying this week, and then we got qualifying Saturday and Sunday. It jumps right into it, and then the next week it's practice, and then you got carb day that Friday, and then 2 days later the race. It saves that extra week of teams having to be on track. They got the tire test at the end of April / beginning of May that, gives you a little bit of a tease, allows the teams to kind of see where they're at, but it's not, on track activity all month, because I think it's pretty fair to say, and it's been documented, that it got too expensive. And I think just having a race weekend kind of to split it all up is much more affordable.
I mean, I hate to sound like this guy, but even to me, it seems still a little overkill with the amount of practice sessions that they have. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like Daytona was for NASCAR for so many years. You'd have
Preseason Thunder.
You had preseason Thunder. You had like 8 practice sessions going into the 500. They cut it down to 3,
Yeah.
and I'll be honest with you, there's no real difference. I mean, yeah, it's nice to see cars on track, but after a while, what can you talk about? They're just practicing.
Right. And if you want to make the comparison, Bump Day for Indy was just about as useful as the dual races are for NASCAR right now, because I mean, how many cars, if we're talking total cars, have been eliminated from the Daytona 500 in the past 3, 4, 5 years? And you could say the same for Indy too, because we've barely just been scraping by, getting 33, 34 entries. Except for last year, we had 35. This year we have 36, and I think that the expectation was we'd have more. But regardless, the 500's seeing an upswing in momentum, and the series is seeing an upswing in momentum. We've got the full season package with NBC and NBCSN. And I think IndyCar is it's not a huge rise, but it's definitely it's an uphill battle for sure. They're getting there.
Well, let's just say this: I think there's been 24 cars, with the exception of Barber, maybe, on the grid every single week.
Versus 2017, where we had 21 cars, I believe.
Yeah, 21 full-time cars, but
21 full-time plus the Harding Racing oval entries.
yeah. So yeah, definitely the series is going in the right direction. Jay Fry, Mark Miles, they know what they're doing, and it really shows.
Now I will say, while we're still on the topic of IndyCar, that win for Simon Pagenaud was huge, because like we said, it's been almost 2 years since his last win, and I mean, if we're being honest, if Menards and all their partners, DXC Technologies, if they're not completely sold on him, Penske's one of those guys where it's like, what have you done for me lately? And other than the championship in 2016 and a couple wins in 2017, not much. And 2018 was pretty bad, and I say it's bad. It wasn't very eventful. He ended up 6th in points. He's 11th in points right now, but no wins that last season. And I think it's fair to say he was pretty close to being on the chopping block for a while.
I would have said before his win that he was on the chopping block. That it was basically a shoehorn in that Rossi was probably going to go to Penske.
That is actually something that I've got to back up there as well. After working around Brad Keselowski's team and a couple of other guys with Penske with the Cup Series, and hearing how they talk about their leadership, their work schedules, their demands that they have to get. Their work ethic is probably one of the most amazing things that I've seen, even amongst the NASCAR guys. It is incredible, the knowledge that these people carry with them, and their drive to finish 1-2 out of how many cars in the field. They want to be within that top 3 every single weekend, and they put their heart and soul into it, and they expect their drivers to put their machines there. It's impressive.
Oh, and I gotta apologize. Pagano is currently 4th in points, not 11th. I don't know where I got that from, but
Pulling stats out of your rear end again.
yes, yeah.
But let's just say this: in the past 22 races, which includes this season and last season, he's had 3 podiums. 3 for a Penske car. So yeah, like I said before this weekend, I could have told you if he didn't even contend, he was probably on his way out. Now
Right.
he could still be on his way out. Now
That's correct.
that's that, and that opens up a whole can of worms. Where does he go and such like that. I don't want to speculate.
No, I don't either. But I will say, okay, in fairness to him, even though his stats haven't been entirely impressive, and it seems like he's been nowhere the last couple years.
Rotten luck.
What's that?
I said rotten luck has plagued him.
Yeah. Well, aside from Circuit of the Americas, which he finished 19th, his last finish outside the top 10 was the first Detroit race of last year. So that's almost a whole year that he's gone finishing inside the top 10, which is very consistent. They just haven't been in the top 5 very much. And I will say, John, yeah, you're right. There's some races where he was very unlucky in that respect.
So transitioning into say our second topic of the discussion, Sunday was Kansas for the Cup cars. Up
Saturday
to
night.
Saturday night. I'm sorry, Sunday. Where did I get that from? But Saturday night was for the Cup cars. Now, up until this point, I think a lot of fans have written off this package just as another gimmick, as something that just is not very good per se. Passing had been down at most tracks, etc., etc. But I'll be honest, even though there weren't, a lot of cautions per se, Saturday night's package was amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
I didn't get to see much of the race because I was at the kart track all day, but it was, from what I saw, it was insane. Yeah.
Part of the reason I think that package did so well at Kansas is the way that this setup was constructed. High downforce, lower horsepower. It kind of lends itself to a much smoother, repaved track where you're not having to worry about as many bumps and about some of the track surface. You look at Kansas, Kentucky, Texas, being Michigan. A lot of these places that have been repaved within the last 4 or 5 years, I would say it's going to lend itself more towards those racetracks simply because of the fact that, yeah, it is still sort of aero dependent, but with the slower speeds, you're still going to have the asphalt in the track to really depend on the grip levels in the tires once everything starts to fall off a little bit. So with like Atlanta, that really wasn't all that impressive to me. But here coming up, once we start the 1.5-mile train that we have in the season, I think it's going to get pretty interesting.
I'm interested to see how Pocono goes. 2.5-mile track. It's bumpy to an extent, but it's been repaved. I think it was repaved in 2012, so it's not like super bumpy. But
I'm actually concerned about Pocono.
Really?
Not actually excited, but concerned, because if we remember correctly, the Xfinity Series ran high downforce package at Pocono. What was it? 2 seasons ago, and it was just not very good at all. Not
Yeah.
very good at all. And I just think that just comes down to, Pocono is not necessarily a stock car track. At least with the current configs and such that they have now, it doesn't lend itself well to racing.
Heavy aero dependent cars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you can say that a package like this, or a package like with what IndyCar has, where the car is very aero dependent. Uh, it the racing is better when you have cooler temperatures, when the sun is not beating on the track. I mean, look at the Indy 500 last year, 95 degrees, I believe. I mean, I was there. I think it was 95 degrees that day.
Yes.
The racing, I mean, people say it sucked. It wasn't bad. I mean, I was there. It was pretty decent, but it wasn't the best. And you look at Kansas, it was pretty good. And you look at some of the other races like Vegas this year for NASCAR. It was pretty warm, I'd say. I mean, not by Vegas standards, but
Actually,
if we're talking,
it was cold for Vegas standards. It was like 60 degrees. It was just,
yeah,
I think it was just meh for that track because it's not
yeah,
wide. It's not as wide as, say, Kansas, and the groove really hasn't widened out like Kansas. Because I know Bowman was talking about, compared to all these repaves, Kansas has the widest line because of the harsh winters they have there. So that allows the track surface to age, per se.
that's actually pretty interesting. I didn't think of it like that.
Right. And then you have to wonder about the compound, because I know from working in Kentucky, they used a special compound to try and get the track to age faster. Something they mentioned was the winters that we have in Kentucky, not nowhere near as cold as they can get in Kansas sometimes, but we have wild fluctuations between temperatures. I mean, just last week we were up right about in the mid 80s, and 3 days later we're down in the 30s.
Yeah,
Yikes.
So
yeah.
we're hoping with that new compound, or not compound, but with the new mixture of asphalt that is down, that as the weather fluctuations go through, as the track gets broken in a little bit, that we're going to see more and more of that groove show up within the next year or so, hopefully a lot sooner, because the train racing that has been going on isn't really all that fun to watch.
Well, on top of that, well, this is another topic for, I guess, another day with Kentucky. It's just, I don't understand SMI's decision to change the banking in one corner and then have it completely different in another.
Yeah.
That produces crap racing.
To me, I feel like that was driven just by the fact that the
Texas,
cars did not produce good racing, so they felt the need to change the track. And
Well-
they did the same thing with Texas. You're right, John. They screwed Texas up. They screwed that up, man. Like turns 1 and 2 at Texas, forget about it. I mean, it's better than what it was the first year they repaved it, but it's terrible.
yeah, and just
Fix the car, not the track. The tracks are fine. Kentucky was fine. Texas was fine. Quit screwing with these tracks.
well, the one thing is that stop screwing with the tracks and then stop hitting copy and paste.
Yeah.
Back in 2008, it was the progressive banking
Yeah.
phase that everybody went through. Las Vegas, Kansas, these tracks, and then like say a couple years ago,
Bristol was like that.
Bristol was like that. Then we went to the sticky compound, PJ1, I believe it is.
VHT, there's so many
Yeah.
different compounds
The
or
2
chemicals.
2 years ago, they implemented that at every racetrack. Stop trying to copy paste it everywhere. Examine what you have, and then determine how you can make the racing better.
Yeah.
To me,
I mean, every track's different. It's
Yeah.
not going to work for every track.
exactly.
Now, I'd like to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, especially having had the opportunity to drive on Kentucky Speedway multiple times with the Drive the Track sales, and simply having the ability to work there as a safety worker. Honestly, that track is a blast to drive in something that isn't exactly fixed to the ground by aero. I've had the opportunity to ride with Rusty Wallace driving experience at about 170 miles an hour around the racetrack, and we were in one of the old COT chassis cars.
Mm-hmm.
That thing was so planted to the racetrack, you really couldn't feel the difference in the 3 degrees of banking. But you go in a regular street car or one of our safety trucks, and you really get to feel the difference and can actually see the difference on videos from people driving the racetrack of how different entering turn 1 is as opposed to entering turn 3 at 14 degrees as opposed to 17 degrees. I think if they went back to a less aero-dependent package, that it could make things pretty interesting as far as the setups go and how the cars would behave. But currently, with the way everything is, everything's got to be so stiff sprung. The drivers really just kind of turn it in and either goes or it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of chatter that, Clint Boyer said it on the Dale Jr. Download that, we need to wreck more, which I don't know if that's necessarily the answer, but he made a good point that these cars are too stable. And what these teams are able to do with the underbody, I mean, this isn't the first year that we've talked about this. I mean, it's been a question for the last 3-4 plus years. I mean, think of 2015 Daytona when Austin Dillon just kind of got flung into the catch fence like a rag doll just off of hitting the hood of Denny Hamlin. I mean, that's not normal. That's not something you see every day. That's very abnormal. You just look at some of these crashes like Kyle Larson 2017 Daytona, where he just kind of hit the wall and nosed in and the car just picked up. Or this year, Talladega, Kyle Larson. Very abnormal crashes. I just feel like what they're able to do with the underbodies of these cars, that they are I feel like they're kind of compromising the driver a little bit, not only performance-wise, but also in a safety aspect, because now the safety mechanisms aren't keeping these cars on the ground, and now we're trying to work around cars taking off in different ways than what they used to.
Well, I'll just say this: the one accident that really caught my eye with something's going on underbody-wise. Chris Bell's accident at Daytona a few years ago. Y'all remember that, where he just got spun and then he was sideways and then all of a sudden the car just turned over instantly.
Yeah,
it
wasn't even a weight shift crash.
Yeah, it was the
where he just barrel rolled.
Yeah, where he barrel rolled. But the way the car got air was so interesting, I'll say. It was spinning just fine, and then all of a sudden air caught it and just picked it up like a.
And
like
that's a truck.
Car. Yeah.
And that's just a truck. I mean, it's KBM. It's a TRD team, but that's a truck that is able to do that. And now imagine what they're doing to these Cup cars.
Now, see, a lot of what that has to do, especially with the most recent Cup flips with Matt Kenseth at Talladega a few years ago and with Kyle Larson here recently, is with the cars running closer together, it's a lot harder to avoid somebody.
Yep.
And when these cars run sideways, like probably about a 45-degree angle, they are in basically a no-go zone as far as the roof flaps, the cowl openings on the hood, and everything like that. They're not going to deploy until you get somewhere around 70 to 90 degrees is when they start to become somewhat effective. Part of the issue that's going on here is when these cars are running this close together, you see somebody start to spin, you don't have the ability to avoid, and you hit the car in front of you, shifting the weight toward the point of impact and opening up that bottom side to all of that air from running 180, 190, 200 miles an hour. And there's nothing on top of the car that's going to stop that air from getting under the car and using that massive area of influence under the car to lift it up and flip it over. And the Kenseth wreck and the Kyle Larson wreck recently are perfect examples of that. All it takes is a little touch to change how that car wants to act in the air, and it doesn't matter what you put on top of the car, the underside is going to change everything.
Well, one interesting thing, if you look at where both of those hits were, and off topic, Byron almost went over in the
Yeah.
Larson wreck. So,
Yeah.
with a little bit of influence there, we would have saw him barrel roll down the backstretch. But it seems to me, whatever they're doing, it's something in the crush panels, because both Kenseth and Larson were hit right in the crunch panel. And both of them picked up air once that was damaged. Now, Kenseth had the damaged wheel,
Yeah.
so they added tethers. That wasn't an influence, so it must be something crush panel aerodynamically wise.
Well, I think the tethers are what influenced him, because instead of breaking off, it stayed there and it folded underneath the car, which allowed air to get underneath it.
I think it was more, but the hit was not at the wheel. The wheel was actually still intact
Yeah.
before that. But I don't know. I'm not an aerodynamic
Yeah.
engineer, so.
Well, remember 2014 in the duels, Clint Boyer went over. I mean, like, this is the second year of the Gen 6, and this started happening. This has been happening for years. And thankfully, we're getting a new car soon, and I just hope that, there's some massive aero changes to these cars, because we can't continue to have cars flying like this. Eventually, somebody's going to get seriously hurt, whether it's a spectator or a driver.
Exactly.
And as much as we like to tout how strong these catch fences are, the only way that we could properly protect 100% the crowds behind those fences is to put a wall in front of them.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to like that.
No.
So we leave the cheese grater of a fence in front of them. People don't realize that when a car hits that, they're still going to get hit by paint flecks, pieces of debris, and all kinds of stuff is going to get pushed through that. Fluid, all kinds of stuff is going to go through that. And different tracks have already taken measures to try and prevent that. But with the seat positioning and whatnot, Kentucky is I want to say about 20 feet back from the barrier and about 10, 15 feet up. And from the seats, I'll give them credit. It doesn't look like you're sitting that far away from the wall because of the angle to the racetrack. You can actually see a little bit more that way. But not every racetrack on the circuit is like that.
Yeah. Well, remember Ben Kennedy flew into the catch fence there in the Truck Series in 2015. I was there for that. That was pretty wild.
I was actually on pit road watching that as it happened. I was right at the start-finish line, and right as soon as they went out of view going 3 wide, I saw the fence flex and saw parts going everywhere.
Yeah, he got incredibly lucky there. I think he got turned by Townley, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Of course, never fails. John West Townley causing a wreck.
I was so angry that they canceled or they ended the race then and there.
They didn't have a choice. That fence was destroyed.
Oh, I know, but
yeah, it wasn't just the fence that factored into that.
The support pole was damaged too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was one of the support poles, and I think they said it was about 30 feet of 30 feet of fencing or more that had to be changed, and that wasn't even that big of a hit.
Right.
That was it was either just the front quarter panel or the rear quarter panel of the car tapped the fence.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it just caught the pole.
On the replay, it doesn't look like that much at all, and it managed to tear the crap out of it.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, it got pushed up in, and the back end just clipped it, and as soon as it hit the pole, it just ricocheted it back into the track. Which, those are kind of a double-edged sword, because they do a lot of damage to the car, but they've also saved spectators big time, just with how close those fence poles are together. Because, I mean, even look at Austin Dillon, how he flew, from just looking at it, just a quick glance, it just looks like he flew straight across the track, almost completely horizontal. And at an angle like that, would be really easy to miss a fence pole and just go straight through. Without those fence poles there to support, that I don't feel like that chain link fencing could stop a car.
Yeah.
Well, something that you don't really see on that is they have thick gauge cable.
Yeah, that's right.
Running between the chain link and the poles themselves.
Yeah, running horizontal, I believe.
Yeah, I want to say they're spaced about maybe a foot and a half apart vertically going up there. And that's there also to catch the larger chunks of the car that go through. And especially if one of the poles themselves are impacted, to try and lessen that blow that single pole is going to take if it takes a direct hit or hit directly in the middle. It tries to even out that load as much as it can.
Yeah, really the only other option that is reasonably feasible, and I say this very loosely because I don't see this happening anytime in the near future, just because of cost and research that it would take. But like a Lexan screening, almost kind of how they're testing the windscreen for the IndyCar currently. A screen similar to that, but then you also get into, how thick does it have to be? How much does it warp vision? How, like, the glare from the sun, the curvature of having to line a whole track with that, how that affects how you're able to see through that. And PPG's done a very good job designing the windscreen, but still, we're talking a windscreen for a car versus mile and a half, 2 mile, 2.5 mile tracks. These are multi-million-dollar projects potentially, if we're talking, about going that far.
Oh, absolutely. And most of the tracks on the circuit have already lined the walls themselves with safer barrier. One of the thoughts that was put out there was, instead of blocking off the spectator's vision in that way or whatnot, and this was put out after Robert Wicken's wreck at Pocono, was to raise the spectator's viewing area back and away from the racetrack, and then raise the safer barrier walls and the
Yes.
exterior walls. I think it was like a foot and a half to 3 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Which that wouldn't be the first time that the wall has been raised. Remember, go back and watch like Indianapolis in the 60s. The wall was very short. I think it was shorter than the cars themselves, like the wheels. So it would have been very easy to fly into the fence.
well, another thing that's kind of like how that's kind of like the dirt track model. You put the fence, 10, 15 feet high because, they're going to hit it and such like that. So in the corners, they're not flying off into oblivion. It helps keep the cars inside, helps keep the spectators safe. So I'm all for that. If they have to build up the wall, and if they have to remove a little bit of seating, that's not going to be a bad thing. We're not filling up these arenas like we were 15 years ago. So
Right. Well, and think of it like this. And you bring up a good point with dirt racing, John. Think of Knoxville. How
Yeah.
tall those walls are.
Oh my God, yes, they're so
And they
tall.
need every bit of that.
Yes.
I think they actually, one time they had in turn one, and I think this was last year, they had a car leave the track. Like, they bounced up and over the wall. I think.
I remember seeing a video, somebody went up and over the scoreboard, and I think it was turn 1.
Yeah. So like, think of NASCAR having a wall that tall and having grandstands elevated so that you could see correspondingly. Having those walls that tall. What is it? As long as the spectators can see and the drivers are safer, what's it going to hurt? Hit a safer barrier versus hitting a catch fence.
All right. So wrapping up that discussion, kind of, and moving to our last topic of this evening. So, Formula One. I'm not sure how much you guys have been following Formula One this season, but Mercedes just had their fifth 1-2 finish of the season. It's never been done more than 3 races to start a season out. They are completely ahead of the rest. Ferrari and Red Bull are kind of fighting, and then it's everybody else. So I just wanted to know what your guys' take on Formula One, the current climate it is now, and maybe should they go a little bit more spec, kind of like IndyCar, where the drivers, are making the difference, not necessarily the cars.
And time for spec and balance of performance, because I'm tired of seeing the 3 stars up there. As much as I love Formula One, the technology behind it, there's a point you got to say, okay, this is becoming a one-horse race, and it's getting a bit ridiculous.
And now that's not to say that in the past, we haven't had teams dominate, but not for this long and this dominant per se. Probably since the 50s, I would say.
Right, and I mean, you look back the late 90s, early 2000s with Ferrari and I think it was Renault there for a little while, had a really good streak with Fernando Alonso. You have dominant drivers and dominant teams, but at some point you got to look at the technology that's being developed and how badly these guys are getting trounced. I mean, look at qualifying, even amongst teammates. Bottas put up a qualifying lap that was well over half a second faster than his teammate. And from there on, it just, you look at the scoreboard and you're like, what, 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds back to the guy in last place out of a field of 22 cars?
Exactly. And I've seen there's been some jabs at F1 from IndyCar drivers, even a former F1 driver. Graham Rahal says that I'm excited to watch the F1 race, but the top 5 is separated by 45 seconds. Kind of as a jab, and Rossi's like, "Oh, well, they at least had a safety car, to bunch them all back together." But you have that, and then Ericsson even said that, with the advent of the DRS, you're just basically waiting to the DRS zone to pass. There's no other places to pass. So, Zach, what's your opinion on this whole F1, performance issue? I guess balance of performance issue.
I'll be completely honest, and I say this trying to be as unbiased as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really a huge F1 fan.
Okay.
And I don't say that as somebody that's not open to being an F1 fan. I just have a hard time keeping up with it. Like, I know what's going on within the sport, but I have a hard time partially because of time zones and everything. Obviously, international races, they'll be middle of the night for us Americans. But I mean, you still even got highlight videos you can go back and watch, and that's about as much as I watch is the highlight videos, just because I don't find much interest in watching. Being completely honest, there's the racing quality. It just really isn't there. Aside from the starts, which the starts are absolutely incredible. They're insane. First lap, but after you pass the first lap, what do you got? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, go the IndyCar route, go spec, because having that evolution is still big for motorsports. I think that's what F1 is, having that development of manufacturers. You still need that, but when you have, it used to be you'd have 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that were mixing it up every week, but there was usually one powerhouse team that set the standard. And Mercedes is that standard, but there's nobody to compete with them, really. They're on their own level. And after 5 years, I would say, of dominance, there still has not been anybody to compare with them. And it's kind of sad, to be honest.
I just completely agree. It's just
Where's the parity? There has been no parity at all.
Yeah, there actually hasn't. The last time a non-Ferrari, Mercedes, or Red Bull driver has won was Kimi Räikkönen for Lotus, which is now Renault, in 2013.
2013, gosh.
So we're talking 6 years where 3 teams have won a race.
That would be like saying Andretti, Penske, and Ganassi have won every IndyCar race since 2013.
Yeah.
Imagine how boring that would be. Or Penske, Gibbs, and say Hendrick winning every NASCAR Cup race since 2013. Do you know how boring that would be? Seeing the same teams winning every week?
It would just, I don't know. It's really bad.
Yeah.
I don't understand how fans keep defending it and saying that, oh, it's the modern spec of technology. Okay, cool, but I'm watching it for the entertainment value.
Yeah.
The technology, well, yeah, ooh, this car can go 3.2 seconds faster around this corner than an Indy car. Okay,
Yeah.
if it doesn't produce great racing, who cares?
Now I will give them the benefit of the doubt. If we're talking machine, building the finest machines, Formula One is the purest form of racing. If we're talking formula cars,
Yeah.
but if we're talking wheel to wheel, elbows up, send it into a braking zone and make it stick, over under on somebody, setting up passes. It's not it. I mean, you're
No.
looking further down the FIA ladder for stuff like that.
I mean,
Or looking to America.
I mean, if you look at F2, it has that, which is
Yeah.
pretty pathetic that their second tier series produces better racing than their.
Xfinity series. If I'm being honest.
Let's go truck series. Thank
Yeah,
you
yeah,
very
yeah,
much.
yeah. Truck series for sure.
But no, it's just I don't know. I don't know how they're going to fix it. They want to introduce cost cutting measures, but every time they do, Ferrari vetoes it because they get special privileges because they've been in the sport since the beginning of time.
Instead of having $77 million budgets, we're going to have $75 million budgets.
You just what? Can you repeat that again?
Instead of having a $77 million season budget, we're going to have a $75 million season budget. Cap. Budget caps. That's what I'm saying.
Oh. But yeah, I think the proposal now is something along the lines of $100 million for the cap, because right now I think Mercedes is spending upwards of 350 million pounds.
Yeah, I was just throwing out a number, but
yeah, they're spending they're spending over $250 million on research and development and car development.
It's ridiculous.
It is. It really is.
What's scary about that is that's not the only form of racing that they're involved with. I mean, they're still involved with sports car racing. The fact that they have that much money to throw around is kind of scary.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I don't know. You can't really say it's the pinnacle whenever there's so many rules that don't allow them to, become that pinnacle. In my opinion, they should either throw the rule book out and let them design something with no rules, or or go spec. You can't really have the best of both worlds, in my opinion.
This is just me being a kid, but I miss the 2000s era of F1 cars.
Nice V10s in the back.
Yes.
And
I'm not saying they have to be obnoxiously loud like the V10s, but
don't make them sound like vacuum cleaners.
Yeah. Yeah, and as ugly as I think it was like 2009 to 2013 cars were.
It produced probably the best racing.
Yeah.
In over a decade.
Right. Definitely. But what can you do? We're not the FIA. But that being said, it's been a pretty wild week in racing to talk about.
Yes, it has.
And Scott List-Ramler, thanks for joining us this week, buddy. It's been great having you as a guest.
It's been awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.
So, where can we find you on social media?
Well, if you look for me on YouTube, I am TKFTRD1 on YouTube, as well as Twitch.tv. Feel free to stop in. I try to stream every now and again, but hopefully can have you guys come up.
Sweet. JP3, where can we find you on social media?
So, you can find me on Twitter at JSPoolIII. You can also find me on Twitch, JP3 Gaming 56, and my YouTube channel, JP3 Gaming. I post occasional gaming videos because I don't have time.
Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ZBCannon4. Follow me on YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Zach Buchanan, and make sure you guys like my Facebook page, Zach Buchanan Racing. Make sure you guys follow the Pit Limiter podcast on Twitter at the Pit Limiter. Make sure you guys go like us on Facebook, Pit Limiter podcast, as well on YouTube. We upload our episodes to YouTube as well. If you miss an episode, go check us out on YouTube. And if you haven't found us on one of the podcast apps, we're on all major podcast platforms. Make it easier to listen to us. So with that being said, we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye, everybody.